Hello everyone, I'm Jimmy Cox, and today we're going to be talking about changing strings on your acoustic guitar. Now, if you're wondering whether or not it's time to change strings, there's a few things you can look at to see if it's time to go ahead and put them on. The first thing I would look at is just to visually inspect the strings. If they're getting kind of grimy, you can see a lot of buildup on them, or they're discolored and rusty, then that's affecting the sound, and it's time to go ahead and put a new set of strings on your guitar. The second thing is the ear test. Just listen to the strings. If they are starting to sound kind of dull and lifeless, you've noticed a change from what they used to sound like, it's time to change strings as well. The third and most obvious thing is you've broken a string. It happens to the best of us, and it'll happen occasionally to you throughout your life as a guitar player, and that's okay. When that happens, you're going to want to put a whole new set of strings on as well. I would strongly advise against just changing out one string at a time. For instance, if I break my high E string, I would not just want to put one new string on the guitar, or else it's going to sound really bright and new, and the rest of the guitar is going to sound dull and old. So if you break one string, go ahead and put a whole new set on. The only exception is if you're at a gig or a service and you break a string and you need to put one on just to get you through the end of whatever you're doing. That's the only time that's really acceptable. So let's move on now and put some new strings on this guitar. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we need to do is remove the old string. Now, one thing I've done is I've gone ahead and changed out the low E string. The reason for that is I wanted to show you what a new string and an old string look like next to each other. Sometimes it's hard to tell if they're all old strings on the guitar, just how far they've gone. But if you look here, you can really see how bright and new the low E string looks like compared to the rest of the strings. So definitely time to change strings out on this guitar. Alright, a few tools up here that we need, tools and supplies. First and most obviously is your new set of strings. There's a lot of brands out there. I won't really give recommendations. I do typically play these on acoustic though. These are Elixirs. One note about string sizes, though. You'll need to be familiar with that. If you look down at the bottom, it says light 0.012 through 0.053. In guitar vernacular, we would simply call these 12s for that first number. That's a measurement of the width of the strings, these numbers. And 0.012 is the width of the high E string. So if I went into a music store, I would say I need a set of acoustic guitar strings, and I need them to be 12s. Second thing we need is a string winder. This is going to help us get the strings on and off quickly by winding the pegs. Most string winders will have this little notch down here as well, which is called a peg puller, and that's going to help us pull the pins out of the bridge so that we can pull those out and then put them back in to anchor the strings properly. Next is a pair of clippers to clip all your excess strings. Lastly, a tuner so we can get everything tuned back up. Alright, we're going to work on the A string now. So the first thing I would do, grab your string winder, get ready to loosen this string up. I like to pluck the string as I do this just to make sure I'm turning the right way. I like to hear it. So here we go. And you can hear it getting looser as I'm winding, nice and smooth. Eventually it's going to get to the point where the string is loose enough that you can just remove it the rest of the way by hand. Now, quick note, this is acoustic guitar, but if this were an electric guitar and I had a bridge where I had to pull this through some kind of a hole down at the bottom, or if the guitar is strung through and I have to pull it through the guitar to get it out, I would go ahead and clip this so I'm not having to pull all that extra stuff through my bridge. That could cause some damage and create some headache for you. Okay, now we're down here on the other end of the guitar. What we need to do is pull the peg now for the A string. You might be able to do it with your fingers, but usually I'll go ahead and use the peg puller. So that little notch there slips over the peg. You pull it out nice and gently. And that's what it looks like. The pegs on this guitar do not have a groove in the side of them. Many guitars do. They'll have a groove in the peg, and that's where the string sits, but not all of them. I'll set that aside. and remove the string. And if you notice here on the string, there's this little ball, and that's what holds the string in. The peg sits on top of that and anchors it into the guitar. Alright, now I need to get my next string in the guitar. So if I look at the back of my packaging, I'm on the A string. I notice the A is 0.042 of an inch. So this package, 0.042. Some guitar strings, the package is, the strings are all in the same package, and the ball ends will be color-coded. These are all brass, but some of them are color-coded, and you'll look at the packaging to figure out which color is proper. Okay, so we unwind this, and now we're ready to put it in. This is a very important step right here as to how this goes in the guitar. What you don't want is to shove it down in and then put your peg in on top of it. So what happens there is it's not locked in. If you look, I can push the string up and down, and that's not what we want. Your string is not going to be anchored properly, and it's not going to stay in tune. You want to, when this goes in, for the peg to sit right on top of the ball, as so. That way it anchors it into the guitar properly. Otherwise, you can cause damage and wreak havoc on your tuning. So I typically put my ball just barely over the hole, as so, and then push it down in with the peg. Don't push real hard, as you don't want to do damage to the bridge. Okay, now I'm ready to move down to the other end and wind the string on. Okay, so now it's time to get the A string wound on. For me, as a general rule, I like to go ahead and pre-cut the strings. And the way I do that is I start at the peg where the string is going to go on. And I measure the length from this peg to this peg, and then about another half of that width beyond that. And I cut the string there. So if I hold it here, there's one peg length up to here, and then about half of that is here. So I will go ahead and pre-cut the string. It'll usually pop kind of like that. And that'll give me the width that I need. You don't want to have too much, but you also don't want to have too little. That will generally get you where you need to be. Okay, so now it's time to get the string wound on. I've got a binder here that you can see that I used to kind of prop the guitar neck up. This is going to give me some room to work and use the string winder here. So first thing you'll want to do is make sure that the hole on the peg here is perpendicular to the guitar. You can see the opening is here and it's facing towards the inside of the headstock. So I'm going to take my string and insert it from the inside, from this direction, towards the outside. That holds true on both sides of the guitar. If I were going on this side, I would start at the inside and go to the outside if I were doing the B string or one of these over here. I want to go ahead and say now that there are two methods of winding the string onto the peg that I use. This first one that I'm going to show you is for the wound strings, like the low E, A, D, and G, the one that have this wound coating on the outside. The other version I'm going to show you is for the E string and the B string, and on electric guitars on the G string. It's typically unwound on electric guitars as well. Alright, take your string winder, leave a little bit of excess, and we're going to start to wind. And as we do, notice that I'm going to keep tension back here. You don't ever want to wind your string on with the string being loose. I'm even holding tension back here. I don't want that to be loose and flopping around, so I'm going to hold some good tension on it. As I wind, I want you to notice where I'm winding and how this is working. See the excess there? I'm going to put the first wrap underneath this string that's coming down towards the rest of the guitar. I want that part that's sticking out of the peg to be under it, and for the wrap to be over the top. And you can see that here. You'll notice the wrap is on top of it. Now everything else is going to go underneath, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Let's go ahead and wind this the rest of the way. The string winder makes this much easier, although it does pop off every now and then. It happens. If you were trying to do this by hand, what might take you 5 to 10 minutes to change your strings typically might take you 30 to 45 minutes doing it all by hand. String winders are cheap. I would pick one up from your local music store whenever you go to buy your new strings. Okay, I plug the string down just to kind of hear the pitch. I don't want to over tighten it. There we go. So as you can see, the first wind is on top of the excess string and everything else is underneath. And what that does is it clamps onto the string and locks it in and creates friction. This is really going to help your guitar stay in tune. It's very important to do that, to clamp that string down. And that is how I change strings for all of the wound strings. I would do the exact same thing for all the rest of them. And now I'm going to show you a different way of doing this for the unwound strings. Okay, so now we're going to look at the method I use to change strings on the high E string and the B string. I'm not going to show you how to take the string off. As you can see, the high E is already gone because it's the same as what we already looked at with the other strings. So, starting out, I do not pre-cut the string. I leave it all there whenever I start to thread it through the peg here. So I take the string at its full length, insert it from the inside to the outside as so, and pull it through, leaving a good amount of slack back here, about the same as what I had before. As you can see, I've got a good 3 or 4 inches of slack above the guitar neck. Now what you're going to want to do, this is the tricky part, and this is what's different about these strings, is I'm going to take the excess and wind it away from me around the peg. So I'm going towards the headstock, winding it away. It's going to want to pop up every now and then, that's okay. And now I pull it under, if you can see there, it is under the string that is going back towards the rest of the guitar. Then I bring it up and bend it over. What's happened now, if you can look here, is that I've wound the string around and then locked it down over the top of this string. So the string is actually bent around this part that's going down this direction. And we're going to see what happens there whenever I start to wind the string. And that's that it's going to lock this excess string against the peg. We don't have the winding like we do on the other strings, the wound strings. So we need this extra bit of friction in order to be able to hold the string on and keep it in tune. This is a very important step that I found to be effective on your unwound strings. Once I've got it on there, it's going to lock really nice against the headstock. I keep tension just like I did before. Take your string winder, make sure that you're going the right way, and just begin to wind it on. All of the winds on this one, you don't have to do the first wind over and the rest of them under like you do on the other one. That'll take care of itself. Everything should just flow downward. Every now and then the string will get locked around the bottom. You just pull it up with your finger. And wind it like so. Again, you don't want to have too much extra on the peg, but you don't want to have so little that you don't have enough to hold a good position there. Still sounds pretty loose. Tune it up a little more. And one thing I like to do once I get a string on as well is go ahead and grab it at some point. Normally I do it a little closer to the sound hole, but I'll do it here so you can see. And just kind of stretch the string a little bit. Get some of that looseness out, because the strings are going to stretch over time. But if you do a little bit of pre-stretching, you can avoid some of your tuning woes that you might have with new strings. Now I simply take the excess here, clip it. I'll get my tuner out and get it in tune here in a minute, and I'm good to go.